my channel. In today's video, I am talking all about my luxury beauty favorites from the month of September. So if you want to see that video, just keep watching. So in the month of September, actually the weather was still pretty warm where I live in Canada, which has been really nice to have some sunny days, even though we are transitioning into fall and it is fall time now. I am still kind of leaning towards lightweight makeup, I would say, even though for some days I do like to wear maybe like a more medium coverage foundation, and I like to keep my makeup. I'm still wearing one and dones, but in the fall time I like to get a little bit smokier, so you will see products that kind of reflect that. But for primer, I'm still absolutely loving this Chantecaille. This is the anti-aging face tint in the shade Sheer Bronze. So I do wish that Chantecaille would release more shades, because this is obviously not going to be a universal shade. For me, what it does is I can use it in a multitude of ways. And if you've been to my channel, you probably know that some of my favorite products are actually multi-use products that you can get a lot of use out of, because you can use them in a variety of ways, essentially. You don't have to limit it to just using it in one particular way. And so I like to use this, again, in a variety of ways. My favorite way to wear this is using this as a base all over the face, essentially as I would a moisturizer or a primer. But I don't know if you can see what this does to my skin. It honestly just gives the best blurring effect. So you don't see the makeup sitting on top of the skin when you use this as a primer. You just see kind of the result that it gives you. And the result it gives you is this really blurred effect that gives you a slight tint of color. And I think it actually adds a little bit of coverage as well. Like, now that I've added that on my hand, it's kind of blurred any veins or discoloration that I have on the back of my hand. It just makes everything look very velvety and smooth. So I love wearing this as a base, because then I don't require as much foundation over top. So even though I'm adding an extra layer of product, I don't need to go in with as much foundation. So say normally I go in with 2 pumps of foundation. If I use this underneath my foundation, I'll only require 1 pump of foundation. And when I add this, I don't necessarily need foundation over top. I can just go in with a little bit of concealer, and then that is good to go. I can wear this all day long. This doesn't fade, this doesn't crease, this doesn't settle in any lines throughout the day. So this is a great product if you're looking for something really lightweight and you don't like foundation. And I did pick up the Rose Glow version. It hasn't yet come to me because the shipping is slow to Canada apparently. But I can't wait to try that one out. I've heard good things. And then moving on to foundations. So this is something that I actually use as a hybrid of a foundation and concealer, which is so interesting because most of the time when you just can't use a foundation as a concealer. It just doesn't work in the same way. I feel like you usually require 2 different products on the face and on the under eye area. So this is the Chanel Le Beige Water Fresh Complexion Touch in the shade B30. So B30 is a little bit too light if I use it all over my face, but I can just add a little bit of bronzer and it's fine. I can get away with it. This is probably my perfect under eye concealer kind of color. I really love this all over the face. Very similar to the Chanel Water Fresh tint, except this formula does add a little bit more coverage. So you're gonna get more of a light to medium coverage, buildable to medium. And I just find that it looks so beautiful on the skin. It is not too dewy. It doesn't settle. It just sits very nice on the skin. It's really smoothing on any texture on the skin. One of those kind of blurring products that you're not going to see sitting on top of the skin. It really meshes into the skin really nicely. It feels just so good on your skin as well. It has that kind of cooling effect. It's just one of the most beautiful products. And I also love it on the under eye as well, because again, you're gonna get a little bit more coverage than you would with the Chanel Water Fresh tint. So you're gonna get more of a medium coverage concealer. Now, I have to preface this because I am someone that does my concealer before my foundation. And the other day I did try this over top of foundation, adding in this concealer. You can't use this over top of foundation. You have to use this as your concealer underneath foundation, because this will, if you apply it over top of foundation, it will remove product that you've already applied in this area. So for me, I love this as a concealer, but underneath foundation, it works really, really well in that circumstance. And so I would just say use a little bit of caution with this product, because it is a product, because it has more coverage than the Water Fresh tint, it is a little finicky with whatever products you are using underneath, but I have found that as long as I do my concealer before foundation, then this product is beautiful. So this Chanel Water Fresh Complexion Touch is something that I like to use on an everyday basis because, like I said, it's very lightweight. You can see your skin still shining through. And then if I'm looking for something with a little bit more coverage, maybe I just have a little bit more redness going on, maybe I am going out on the weekend or something and it's more of an evening event, but this is not an evening event, I don't go to evening events, but if I'm going out for dinner or something. But this is the Guerlain Parure Gold Matte Foundation in the shade 3N. So this is a little bit too deep for me, but I can make it work. I might pick up a lighter shade just so I have a little bit that I can mix into it, just so it's more of a perfect match. But regardless, this is an absolutely beautiful, beautiful matte foundation. It's not a typical matte foundation where it's going to look dry and heavy on the skin. This is actually a really nice matte foundation because it is more on the medium coverage side. I would say you could even get a lighter coverage. It doesn't cover up as much as some other kind of full coverage matte foundations. This does claim to be full coverage, but I would actually disagree with that. I think it is more skin-like for a matte foundation. And again, even though it is called a matte foundation, I wouldn't say it's very matte on the skin either. There is a slight, subtle, radiant effect to it. There is no shimmer or anything like that, but it's just so beautiful on the skin. It is very forgiving on skin texture. Like I said, just kind of smooths over everything. It smooths out any pores, imperfections, texture on the skin. It blends in such a beautiful way. It looks so spectacular on the skin, and my favorite thing about this is the longevity of this. I was amazed by how well this wore. I will link down my review below, but you can see I wore it for over 10 hours. I think it was about 11 hours that I was wearing it for, and how it performed was amazing. I was barely even like glowy by the end of 10 hours. I did not need to touch up in the slightest. Sometimes I get worried with matte foundations that they'll look too heavy on the skin in person especially, but this is actually a beautiful in-person foundation because it does not look too heavy on the skin. This is what I wanted the Cle De Peau Radiant Fluid Foundation Matte to be. I did not like that Cle De Peau matte version, which is surprising. I love a lot of Cle De Peau foundations, but that one just looked too heavy on my skin. It was a little bit too matte on my skin. This is my perfect matte foundation for a drier skin type. It is spectacular. Some of you have asked how I think this would perform on mature skin, and I actually think if you are someone with mature skin who struggles with matte foundations, this would be a great option to try because of just how it sits on the skin. It just smooths over everything. I think this would perform very, very well. For powder this month, I've kind of just been going back and forth between my favorites. So for everyday, I love the Cle De Peau Refining Pressed Powder because it's translucent. It does not add any coverage, or it doesn't add any color to the skin either. What it does is it refines the skin, like it's called the Refining Pressed Powder. It blurs everything out, makes you look extremely filtered. And then if I am looking for something with a little bit more coverage, if I want my skin to be a little bit more matte, and it's still like skin-like though, because this is a baked powder, and after about 20 minutes, it kind of melts into the skin and does look more skin-like, but this will add a little bit of coverage. This will add a little bit of coverage to my skin, so color and coverage it adds, but it does the perfect job of blurring out your skin as well. So these are just my favorite kind of blurring pressed powders, but I just use the Chantecaille when I want a little bit more coverage, and I use the Cle De Peau if I just want everything to be blurred and set down without adding any texture or color. And the bronzer I've been continuously going back towards is the Chanel Le Beige Oversize Healthy Glow Sun Kiss Powder in the shade Sun Kiss Medium. I am sorry that I keep talking about this, but I just love it so much. This is my favorite powder bronzer that I think I have in my entire collection. I do like it a little bit more than the Guerlain powder. They are different formulas, maybe that's why, but this one's a little bit more pigmented. It's a little bit more powdery, but it's so blurring on the skin. It's really nice because it has this ever so soft like sheen throughout it, but you can't detect shimmer particles. It just has this skin-like sheen to it. So when you apply it to your skin, it just looks so beautiful. I don't even know if you can really see that on my skin, but it adds the most beautiful blurred effect as well, even though it has that soft sheen to it. It's just such a pretty bronzer. I love using this in my eyes as well, and I wish I could buy a backup, but this shade is sold out in Canada, so I cannot. But I would recommend getting your hands on this while you can. The blushes that I have been reaching for this September have been kind of a little bit different for the fall time for me. So Gucci just released these Blush de Beauté Cheek and Eye Powder Luminous Matte Blushes. I chose the shade 04 Bright Coral, that is the shade. And this is just different for me in the fall time because usually I don't go for bright colors. But this is actually a really soft bright color. It's not as punchy as maybe you might think it is. There's kind of a swatch of it there. It's just the most beautiful. I think Luminous Matte is actually, and it's an interesting way to word a product because you think, how can you have a luminous matte? But it just has this slight bit of radiance to it, but it leans more towards the matte side, I would say. But there's just this specialness to it that makes it better than just something that's matte and flat. There is a little bit of something that gives you life to your skin. It gives you a little bit of color. It's such a beautiful product. It's lovely. There are no detectable shimmer particles in this as well. Everything is very refined. It's that type of blush that enhances your skin. It doesn't look too powdery on the skin. It blends right in. It kind of has that melting effect that just really gives life to your cheeks, and it doesn't emphasize any texture. It doesn't emphasize the pores. It's beautiful. I really, really love this blush. If you are someone that suffers from texture and don't want any of that emphasized, this would be a beautiful blush. I think this would work well on mature skin. Highly recommend this formula. And then as a typical fall blush, this is the Dior Rouge blush in the shade 459 Charnelle. I talked about this in my favorite luxury products for fall time. I just think that this shade screams fall time. You can just see how beautiful this tone of blush is. It's just the perfect nude tone, but it has a little bit of peach, it has a little bit of rose, it has a little bit of brown. It just is the perfect your cheeks but better color. It's very flattering on the skin. It is more of I would say it's a very pigmented blush. So when you go in with it, I would just make sure that you go in with a lighter hand, tap off that excess product. Even though it's pigmented, it's not a super powdery blush or anything. It blends really well into the skin again. And there's an ever so soft, very similar to the Gucci, there's an ever so soft skin-like sheen to it without there being detectable shimmer particles. You aren't going to see shimmer sitting on the skin. It's extremely beautiful. I just love that tone for the fall time. I think it's perfect. I have two different highlighters that I've been reaching for, just depending on what type of look I want. So the first I will be talking about is something that is very subtle, very subdued, perfect for every day. This is the Cle De Peau Luminizing Face Enhancer in the shade 22 Shooting Star. So this is one of the reformulated versions of the Cle De Peau Luminizing Face Enhancer. I wish they separated the names because they have 3 highlighters in the 3 digits that are more pigmented, more intense, more of a blinding highlight. And then they released 3 highlighters in the 2 digits, which are more of that formulation that was in their previous Luminizing Face Enhancer that is very subtle, very subdued, very natural, just skin enhancing on the skin. It just makes your skin look better versus you looking like you've applied a highlighter. And this is one of the 2 digits that is more of that subtle version, but this is very similar to their previous version. And I just think it looks so beautiful. Even though the shade, I feel like you would think it was too dark on me, because it is so subtle, the color, like it doesn't add that tint of color. It just, it's such a gorgeous shade. I feel like you could use that on the eyes as well. It is a little bit more of a powdery highlighter, but I feel like because of that powderiness, it actually is very flattering on the skin. It's a very finely milled powder, and just Cle De Peau just makes such good products. I love that effect that it has on the cheeks. It gives me just this, it just makes my, you know what it is? It's kind of like the buffing technique. You know how you can like buff all your products together at the end of your makeup application? And it's just a subtle difference that makes your skin look even better. I feel like this is a highlighter that just adds a subtle difference, but it just makes your skin look even better without it being detectable on the skin. Like, wow, you've applied a highlight to your skin. That's the type of product this is, and I just love it. And if I do want something more intense, this Chantecaille Sunbeam Cheek and Eye Shade in the shade Ray is absolutely beautiful. Even though this is a bit more intense, it's not over the top, it's not a blinding highlight. This is definitely going to give you a little bit more pigmentation, more of a dewy, glossy effect on the cheeks. So it actually makes it look like your cheeks are glossy. It makes you look like your cheeks are just kind of glowing and wet. It is very beautiful. Again, there are more shimmer particles in this one, but it's very refined. They're closely packed together, so you aren't going to see any glitter or those flecks of shimmer on your skin. It does melt into the skin very nicely because this is a big gelée product, so it has that effect where it will kind of melt into the skin. It's beautiful. You can also use this shade on your eye as well. Now, eye products I've been loving. So of course I have to mention my one and done favorites for the month. So I did a video, it was actually the Guerlain foundation video, where I used this combination on my eyes and I just loved it. This is the Sisley Ombre Éclat Liquide eyeshadow in the shade 2 Copper. Just a beautiful sheen. Even though this is called copper, it's not actually a copper tone. It's almost like a taupey bronze. It's just so beautiful. It's nicely pigmented, but it blends out easily. It gives you just a beautiful sheen to your eyes. It's not over the top. It's not obnoxious. This is a perfect everyday one and done shade because of how long lasting it is, how beautifully it blends out, and it's just a very subtle sheen that it gives your eyes. Nothing over the top. Very continuous kind of shimmer that I love. And then over top, I've been layering this Bobbi Brown Luxe eyeshadow, Rich Metal, in the shade Melting Point. So I actually picked up this Bobbi Brown palette, their Luxe Eye and Chic palette, and the shade Melting Point is actually a permanent eyeshadow, but I loved this shade so much in this palette that I actually went out and purchased this full-size product because I just was obsessed with how this looked. I can't believe I didn't have this shade previously. I love this formulation. Similar to the Chantecaille Luminescent eye shades, very, very similar formula. I would say that the reflection in this Bobbi Brown Melting Point shadow is just a little bit more of a continuous, it's a little bit more refined than the Chantecaille. But if you can see that, it is the most beautiful champagne bronzy glow. It is perfection. It is so beautiful all over the eyes. It just makes your eyes look glossy and just gives you that kind of supermodel golden glow effect that is just absolutely stunning. And it's the perfect one and done shade for every day because it's not too deep, it's not too warm toned, not too cool toned. It's the perfect neutral tone that I would wear for everyday wear because it just looks so glossy and wet and beautiful on the eyes. Absolutely so elegant and sophisticated. And the other eyeshadow I've been pulling for, this is more for an evening look on the weekends when maybe I have more time to do my makeup, or if I'm going out somewhere where I want to maybe be wearing a little bit more makeup. This is the Chanel Multi-Effect Quadra eyeshadow, the Tweed eyeshadow quad in the shade 01 Tweed Cuivre. We have these beautiful neutral warm tones in here. The one shade I don't love is this really sparkly shade, but all these other tones are beautiful. They're kind of those rich, I would say molten brown bronze shade that have a bit of a red tone in them. And that red tone I just think is so flattering on the eyes. Perfect fall time palette. I also mentioned this in my fall luxury favorites, but this is just a gorgeous formulation. Specifically the other three shimmers, like they're just very buttery, they're pigmented, they're more of that sophisticated shimmer where it's very refined. The particles of shimmer are more closely compacted together versus you seeing those shimmer chunks, except that the lightest shade in here, you can see the glitter. It is almost like a dry formula, so you can actually feel the glitter texture. That's just not my favorite, so I don't really use that shadow, but the other three are absolutely gorgeous. You can see that kind of antiqued effect that it has, those really subtle red tones to it, which just will make any eye color stand out. Chanel does a really great job of presenting us with that very natural glam makeup. It's not over the top. We're not going to have too much pigmentation. It's going to be very flattering in person, which is my favorite kind of makeup. For lips, my combination that I have been going towards, I've been trying to pull out some old favorites just so I get use out of more lipsticks instead of using the same one over and over. So I've been using the Gucci Rouge Lèvres Satins. This is their satin lipstick in the shade 200 Blaze of Noon. This is a fantastic everyday nude shade. It has a little bit of warmth to it for a nude, but it's beautiful. Can you see how lovely that is? It has enough color to it where it gives your face life. It's not too nude where it's going to completely just nude everything out where you just look dead almost. This is a nude that gives you life. It has enough color to it. It has enough warmth where it just makes your complexion look even better when you apply it. Really lovely formula because it is more satin, so it just glides over the lips really nicely. It doesn't emphasize any lines on the lips. Like, I have very dry lines and they tend to get emphasized easier because of that fact. Just a beautiful formulation, and I don't need a lip liner with that as well. And then over top, I've been loving the Cle De Peau Radiant Lip Gloss in the shade 2 Warm Crystal. Again, I mentioned this in my fall favorites video because it's a beautiful neutral nude tone, but has an ever so slight brown tint to it. So I just think it makes it the perfect color for fall time, where I still want something nude, but having a little bit of brown I think is really flattering. Very neutral shade. It's a brown tone that doesn't make you look dead. Really nice formulation. It just adds a subtle tint to the lips. It's not going to give you a lot of color or anything like that, but it is a gorgeous formula. It glides very nicely on the lips. Again, doesn't emphasize any lines. Really lovely gloss. If you haven't tried these Cle De Peau glosses, I feel like they're really underrated. And then the last lip product that I've been loving is the Chanel Rouge Cocoa lipstick in the shade 402 Adrian. This is actually just like a classic Chanel shade, but it's the perfect nude lipstick. Now this is lighter than the Gucci lipstick. I'll go back with the Gucci and show you a swatch. So the Gucci lipstick is definitely more pink. It gives you a little bit more color, where the Adrian shade is more of that peachy nude, which is a lighter tone. But this Chanel lipstick just pairs well with any eye shade. So I can use it with like that Chanel palette, that Tweed palette, where it's kind of a little bit more intense. It pairs really well with those more intense eye looks. It pairs really well with any kind of blush you want to wear it with. So there's just a great option if you're unsure with what to pair your looks with. So those are all my favorites from the month of September. I think I mentioned everything. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let me know down below all the products that you have been loving from the month of September, or at least share your top 3. I would love to hear from you and keep the conversation going. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Like this video if you like it, and I'll see you in my next video.